Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the Women of the West Indies show. If you're new here, I'm Vernaire, your host. And first off, let me wish all of the amazing fathers in the West Indies a happy Father's Day. Unfortunately, my father passed away 3 years ago, but I wish him a heavenly Father's Day, and also to my three brothers, happy Father's Day as well. Last week, I sat down with the phenomenal Anguillian entrepreneur, Avern Richardson, and this week, we're heading back to Anguilla via the Cayman Islands for an inspiring conversation with the fashion designer and personal stylist, Charla Hobson. Good afternoon, Charla, and how are you? Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Start again.
Good afternoon, Vernaire, and I just want to thank you so much for having me on the show with you this evening. And I'd like to also add to the sentiments that you just expressed in terms of Happy Father's Day to all the amazing dads out there, including my dad who's listening, and my hubby and my brothers. And also to those who, this is not a happy day for you, just let you know that I'm holding space for you today.
That's awesome. I know because, fathers are so important. And even though we're women of the West Indies, I'm hoping that we have some regular male listeners who are tuning into our inspiring conversations. So, guys, as usual, I want you to go and grab your favorite drink, settle into a comfy seat, and join us for another inspirational conversation. Welcome to the W.O.W Show. So, guys, if you're just tuning in now, you are tuned in to Women of the West Indies on Radio Anguilla and 664 Connect Media. My name is Vernaire and I am your host. And this afternoon, we're heading to Anguilla again with the fashion designer come personal stylist, Charla Hobson. So, Charla, again, I hope that you are feeling fantastic on this beautiful Sunday.
I am, and I'm so excited to be here.
Absolutely. So Charlotte, we're gonna take things all the way back, as I do with all of the guests that come on the Wow Show. You're born and raised on the beautiful island of Anguilla, but you currently reside in the Cayman Islands. So
Oh,
today I'm doing it with a little bit of twist. Can you tell me one thing that you love about the Cayman Islands that you cannot find in Anguilla?
wow. Maybe anonymity. Kidding, not kidding, but growing up on a smaller island, it can be like the radar is always on you. And I guess like if there's one thing, I mean, they're both very beautiful islands with great people. So really and truly, there's not just one thing that I can really find, but if I had to be silly, that would be it, I guess. And my family, my hubby and my kids, they're here.
I know what you're saying as well, because that's one of the things I always say about Montserrat. It's very difficult to be anonymous. Like when I lived in the UK, I can literally go to the supermarket in my pajamas and no one would care or know. But if I step out in Montserrat, there's always someone who knows me. And if they don't even know what I look like, as soon as I start speaking, people say, I know that voice. so, so I totally understand where you're coming from. So Charlotte, tell me a little bit about your childhood growing up in Anguilla, especially with a family that was very interested in the arts.
Okay. Um, I would say I had a very beautiful childhood, one that was, filled with very rich experiences. My family wasn't wealthy or anything, but I remember growing up in a home where experiences were important and family was very important. And so I had a childhood. I grew up in a Christian household as well. But as I said, family was very important. So whether it was my mom's family or my paternal side of the family, I remember spending so much time with them. My grandma, my dad's mom, she lived in Sandy Ground, which is a very culturally rich village in Angola. And just being on the beach from morning to night, spending vacations with her, and just being with other kids who lived like very close to each other, because where I lived with my family, it wasn't a very densely populated neighborhood. I did have like a few friends, like maybe far apart, but it wasn't a situation like where you had like neighbors per se or even kids your age. So that was something that I really enjoyed in my childhood. Also, my dad actually had a degree in fine arts, and he was a painter in addition to being an art teacher at one point. And I also remember whenever my parents would travel, my dad in particular, he would bring back art, right? Art, different cultural art pieces, whether it was Jamaica or whatever, wherever he went, and visiting art galleries with him as well. And also my grandmother, my mom's mom, she was a dressmaker, and she also was very crafty. She made jewelry. So being exposed to that also, I would say, played a great role in my interest in the arts. And my aunt, she and her partner had a music store in Anguilla. It was the only music store to my knowledge. And just being exposed to like the album art and the different artists from the US and all over, just seeing them and seeing like the lives they lived and the different pictures on the albums and that sort of stuff. I think all of that really, shaped my childhood experiences and my perspective on different things. Hmm.
That's really interesting because typically in the Caribbean, you don't often get someone that's surrounded by so many creatives in their family, which is
Hmm.
why I guess that your mom was so interested in sending you to sewing classes
Hmm.
around the age of 11.
Yes.
At first, you were hesitant to attend, but then
Hmm.
you ended up loving it. So, what do
Yeah.
you think was the turning point during that class that really ignited your passion for creating?
Well, actually, from you saying that, it actually made me think back as well. When I was like in elementary school, my mom sent me to like, I would go to like embroidery classes with like Mabel, a lady from Angola. I think she's passed now, God bless her.
Okay.
So Mabel and teacher Isa, I think was the other lady's name. And once again, it wasn't something I was really interested in, but my mom really sought to expose me to a lot of things at a young age. And I appreciate her for that. And then, as you mentioned just now, as a teenager, my parents enrolled me into a sewing class over the summer. It was a sewing class that was organized by Miss Anita Ruan, who had the foresight back then to see, this is something that young women in Anguilla may have needed. And I was very reluctant because whenever I thought about sewing, like, yes, I loved fashion, but whenever I thought about sewing, I thought like, very like old timeish, it's made. I'm like, I don't want to go to no sewing class. And when I went, I think something that really stood out for me was that Miss Brown, she was the name of the teacher. She was from St. Kitts actually, and she would come to Angola in the summer for the class. We started making things for ourselves that we can wear. So it was a very relevant sewing class. It wasn't like you making pillows and aprons and that sort of stuff. So on the first day, we hit the ground running, making a skirt, and we made like dresses, and it ended like with a fashion show at the end of summer where you were able to display your pieces to the families and stuff and the other kids that were engaged in the sewing camp. So I think even her approach to how she facilitated the class was something that stood out for me. So it was able to change my perspective about seeing sewing as something that was like, very like old timeish or old fashioned. It was just. And that's the importance of, certain teachers and the way they go about their strategy for teaching things. Yeah.
I think that's the cool thing as well. The fact that you mentioned that you were making clothes for yourself, because, like you said, I remember being in the UK and then we had, I can't remember the name of the class, but basically we were learning how to sew and we were making pillows and things that we were not interested in. So it's no wonder that most of us didn't follow through. But if you made something for yourself, that's also always already bringing out a sense of pride in your
Yes.
creation.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's really cool. So, guys, I just want to thank everybody who's tuned in online. Thank you so much for tuning in. And obviously, everybody on Radio Anguilla who has it luck. Thank you so much. I am speaking to Charla Hobson, and she is an Anguillian fashion designer and personal stylist. So, again, you mentioned that you started off making clothes for yourself and your cousins and your dolls.
Mhm.
So is that first piece that you made in class the first piece that you'd have actually made for yourself, or did you go on to get a little bit more creative? What was your first standout design?
Um, well, it would be the pieces that I created during that class, but even before that, like I was a real like girly girl, right? So I had a lot of dolls and stuff, and I would like make clothes for dolls. So I guess that's why my parents, thought about enrolling me into that class. But the first things I really made for myself were those pieces for that, and then a couple of years later, I would have designed my prom dress also. So those were some, if I had to think about like some key pieces that stood out, that would be one of them.
Right. So after that, what would you say took you from attending that sewing class to actually aspiring to be a fashion designer? What was the turning point there?
The turning point, I guess, would be a bit of delusion paired with a great supportive family, parents, uncles, aunts, siblings, and friends who just really allowed me to be a dreamer and think that anything is possible. And I'm someone who I would describe as very solutions oriented, and I also like to, create experiences for people. So in Angola at that time, when it came to fashion, a lot of it was more around like pageantry, and that sort of stuff. So there were people who were doing fashion, but not like going by the title of like a fashion designer. I don't think there was anyone who had like a degree in fashion design. There was a young lady by the name of Sharifa who did like swimsuits. She lived in the US and she did swimsuits, and I really used to, admire her as an Anguillian or whatever. Um, but I think that was a turning point for me, just wanting to create a new experience, wanting to live out and bring my visions to life, and to also show other people that this is something that could be possible within our community.
Fantastic. So it's one thing to know that you're interested in fashion design. It's a whole different thing to then go on to host your own fashion show. Because as you mentioned in Anguilla at the time, not to say that you were the first fashion designer, but you were the first person to actually take that step out and as a teenager to start doing fashion shows. So what inspired you to host your first fashion show in 2004 when you were still in the sixth form?
I think it was kind of maybe having a bit of a point to prove. When you're that age, you think that the world is your oyster, and that, you may have some voices or people around you who might be, saying like, this is not possible. People don't have an interest in this. So I think it was a bit of that that would have pushed me, because I was always someone who readily accepted challenges and was a bit of a rebel, if I might say.
So in terms, obviously at such a young age in sixth form, what were some of the challenges you faced putting on that first show? Can you remember?
Yeah, I would say some of the challenges for sure would have been financial constraints, but I would say that the Anguilla community really came out in a big way, even like in terms of the business community and the support that they gave over the 7 years that I had those shows. And also, what was I saying? Sorry, lost my
The Anguillan community was really supportive. Yeah.
very supportive. My friends, my family, it was like I just said this was my idea, this is what I wanted to have happen, and people just gave of themselves and their abilities and the different resources they had in a very selfless way. And I think that's something that made it all a possibility.
So after hosting that first fashion show, you ended up hosting fashion shows for over 8 years. To show, and you also showcased your work outside of Anguilla in places at Trinidad, Atlanta, and New York. Can you share with us some of the most memorable moments from those fashion shows that you produced, and how producing a fashion show outside of Anguilla contributed to your growth as a designer?
Okay, so one of the first things that come to mind there is my first fashion show. Um, I just had all these ideas and I wanted to have this show, and the show was happening, and I could never forget the night when I stepped out and I just saw people coming and people coming and people coming. And I think if I could remember well, we had in attendance about 400 or more people at that show, right? And that was a memorable moment. And then, as you said, going into the diaspora and even in the US doing the shows, I just realized that, there was a need for a Caribbean perspective, a Caribbean narrative when it came to fashion. It was something that was missing, and so there was a lot of love and appreciation around that in terms of my work being received. Mhm.
Awesome. And one of the really cool things that you did whilst you were hosting these shows is you also created a model team. Because I expect if there wasn't really so much of a fashion industry, there probably weren't many models.
Mhm.
So And it was also not just a modeling team, but a female empowerment group. Why was it so important to you at such a young age to focus on not just having models, but also empowering them?
I think it would be just the whole female aspect of it. I mean, I'm someone who had a very close relationship with my mom, with my grandma. So women have always been, very important to me. And I also realized at a young age that the support I had wasn't really something that was the experience for everyone else. And so I think just that alone made me want to, be a source of encouragement to these girls. Yes, they were modeling, but I also wanted them to know like this is not just about fashion. You may not even want to be a model. And, let's just support each other. At that time, some of us were beginning to look into college. Some of us were already in college. Some of us were looking into alternate careers and stuff like that. And so we were able to partner with each other and share information with those who were younger than us, hang out together. And yeah, that's how we came about, really.
And also acknowledging the fact that some of their parents would probably be dissuading them from being a model because
Yeah.
of, as you know, like, especially in the Caribbean, I know things like America's Next Top Model and things like that would have been around at that time, but they
Hmm.
probably didn't see that as something that you can potentially pursue as a career. And I think it's only now that you have loads of women leaving the West Indies and going further afield and having actually reasonable modeling careers. So, what was it like during that time when you were trying to get girls to strut their stuff?
Well, it also, as you said, in the Caribbean, it's almost like a woman showing like any sign of confidence is like the devil or something. And so even like when you saw girls brave enough to like go into pageants or brave enough to go on a stage, it would be like people would be like, oh, that blows your head up, or that does this. So there was sort of a negative connotation around it as well. And so I think the whole empowerment aspect of it was also me trying to um, promote it as something that was positive outside, even outside of pageantry, because as I said, pageantry was a big thing, and that was probably like the only platform really for some girls to be able to, show up on stage and grow and build their confidence and thrive, right? And so this was another avenue.
Brilliant. So, guys, if you're just tuning in now, we're going to take a little break and be back in a few seconds. So, guys, welcome back to the Women of the West Indies show with me, your host, Vernaire Bass. If you have been listening so far, thank you so much for your eyes and your ears. I'm speaking to Mrs. Charla Hobson today, and she has just been telling me about her childhood growing up in Anguilla and also how she kicked off her fashion career by hosting her first fashion show in the sixth form. So, Charla, after in 2006, sorry, you left your flourishing career in Anguilla to attend the Savannah College of Art and Design in Atlanta. What qualification did you pursue, and how did that experience influence your approach to not just fashion, but also business?
Okay, so in 2006, I actually did not go straight into SCAD. I did begin at the University of the Virgin Islands. I just decided that I would try to knock out some of my credits, like the initial credits, before I like go even further. And so then I transferred after to the Savannah College of Art and Design, which it has a big campus in Savannah and then one also in Atlanta. So when I went, the idea was to pursue a degree in fashion design. Now, when I got there and I started, I realized that, okay, this might be a little bit too much in a box for me because, yes, I loved fashion and this is, what I wanted, right? It
Yes.
felt a little too boxed in. So I made a decision to swap my major. So I made fashion design my minor, and my major was fashion marketing and merchandising, which is, marketing and merchandising is transit into any industry pretty much, right?
Yes.
I decided to do that. And then with the design aspect as well, since I had already been designing for quite some time, I knew a lot of the practical stuff, right? So it was like, should I really get a major in this, like I already know quite a bit and it's a practical career, right? So that was that. And then I would also say I didn't leave it behind, because even while I was in school, that's when I was going back and forth doing these fashion shows during the summer, and also even having like clients while I'm in college and making and going.
Okay.
So it was something I was doing like all along throughout the journey of being a college student. Mhm.
Interesting. So now that you add the fact that you were still doing fashion design and fashion shows, my next question is even more interesting, because in your first year of college, you found out that you were pregnant with your son. And
Mhm.
in your final year, you learned that you were pregnant with your daughter. So, what went through your mind each time you discovered that you were expecting? And where did you find the determination within yourself to continue, especially when most young people would think, oh my goodness, this is, I need to give up, I need to focus on my kids. But here you are, not just with two kids, you're running a business, hosting fashion shows, and still pursuing college at the same time. So, where did you get that determination from?
Well, one thing I would say, I guess, is the grace of God. And also my family, my partner, who's now my husband, my parents, my in-laws, my friends. I really had a village, right? And without them, it definitely would not have been possible. When I had my son, so I found out I was pregnant with my oldest son in the first year of going to SCAD. And so I had to take a little break for maybe like about 6 months. And then I went back. And then it was a journey of, either my mom or my hubby or one of my in-laws bringing him over, or me going back to visit. And it, of course, was a very difficult season, but it was a sacrifice I had to make. And it was also a sacrifice that my village promoted and enabled me to pursue. And I'm forever grateful to them for that.
Yeah, because what advice would you give to, say, a young girl who may not even have the support system that you had, but find themselves in a similar situation? Like, where did you dig deep to find that courage to continue? Because I think that most people would see that as a full stop. This is it. I can't pursue my fashion career anymore. So what would you say to a young girl that's listening who may end up in that situation or may be going through that situation now?
Good question, Vernaire. I would just encourage that young person to definitely remember their why, right? And in life, although you kind of like want to think in and now, it's always best to be like forward thinking. And a situation might seem impossible in the now, but there's always an end for it, right? And just to lean into whatever support you have. If that support is not your immediate family, there are very kind people in the world. There's very kind extended family, and definitely leaning into your faith, because I must say, like, that was a difficult season in my life, but it deepened my faith in God during that season as well.
Awesome. So, after returning back to Anguilla,
Mhm.
what did you do during that period? Did you continue doing fashion design? So you came back from university, you now have your degree. What did you do next?
Okay, so I returned back home in 2011. And so I would have graduated from college. And that was the year also, as you mentioned, that I was pregnant with my daughter. So I went back. And so when I went off to do fashion, actually, I forgot to mention this. So in terms of being a fashion designer, my end goal was never to be fashion designer name written in the stars. I always had a love for education and facilitating learning. And so I always envisioned that I would always teach like high school students are at the college level. So even like the course you mentioned earlier on clothing and textiles, my experience with that was not great in high school. Remember how we spoke about that? So I had a vision that, I would make this a course where the students would be able to experience what I experienced when I went to Miss Brown's sewing class during that summer, right? In terms of it being relatable, in terms of it being practical, whether it's something you want to make a career of or not, it's something that you can at least learn some skills that you can use for yourself in the future, right? And so when I returned home, however, there were no roles available, and so I went into teaching in elementary, right? And this was not something I had anticipated, but it was the deck of cards that God gave me. And it's something I did to the best of my ability. So I taught visual arts actually for those
Okay.
years after I went back. And then I had my business on the side. Well, not really on the side because it was doing pretty well. So it was like doing two things in one day. 8 to 3:30 would be teaching, and
Cool.
then as soon as school is over till maybe midnight would be pushing out these dresses and pushing out these other things to keep my clients happy. Yeah.
Interesting. And then in 2017, your husband got a job in the Cayman Islands where you reside now, and you decided to move your family there. So obviously someone who mentioned at the start of the conversation that you're very family oriented. What was that transition like for you?
It was easy and hard, right? It was easy in the sense that my mom would have moved with us for the first 3 months to help us with settling in and stuff. And of course hard because I'm someone who's very family centric, and so that aspect was hard. And also, Anguilla is somewhere where I would say generally um, it's a community where a lot of people wouldn't necessarily like leave. It's an island home, like where, you're from Angola, you lived in Angola, right? So it was kind of different, but it was also a beautiful experience and has been a beautiful experience for us as a family unit, my husband, my kids, and I, having to journey this together, relying on each other, leaning into each other. I definitely think is an experience that we wouldn't have been home. you know,
Mhm.
is an experience that I think is invaluable and something that has definitely benefited us as a married couple, and also for my children as well. Mhm.
So what would you say was maybe the most difficult part of that transition, or even something that you weren't really thinking of? Because I think when you move somewhere, you automatically think, oh, my children's education, obviously making friends and stuff like that. But what were some of the things that occurred during that transition that you weren't expecting?
Mhm. Good question. So actually, one of the things I always said that made the transition a bit easy was that my kids acclimated right away. They were like very happy, very at home. So they acclimated well. And as a parent, that really like, that puts, they got into a really good school. I was actually teaching at the same school they were going to. So it was like a season where I just have to once again glory to God that it was a season where I saw God order the steps and put things in place for us, right? So there were, of course, some things I would say in some ways I didn't even realize how the move had affected me until long after, because I didn't feel when I was here or when I got here, I never felt like a big missing home, because it was like we traveled, my mom came, I would speak to my family and friends or whatever. But I started to notice like little changes in me, almost like, not dressing the same, not showing up the same. And I think there was like a sense of guilt. And I had to give myself permission to know that because I'm not living where I'm from, does that mean I don't love where I'm from? And wherever God plants me, I have to bloom there, right?
Okay. Do you think that whole being anonymous thing affected the way that you dress? Because you're just like, well, I'm not no one knows me as the big fashion designer or anything like that. So I can just relax.
Maybe. I think also it was just maybe a sadness that I didn't realize existed from being away from my family.
Yeah, and unfortunately, speaking of sadness, in 2020, I'm sorry, I'm not making you cry, am I? I'm sorry. In 2020, you faced the loss of your dad's mother, and that was closely followed by the passing of your own mother in 2021.
Mhm,
And then to add more weight to your sorrow, unfortunately, your mother's mother passed away in 2023, all against the backdrop of a relentless global pandemic like COVID. How did you cope with such profound losses during such tumultuous years?
mhm.
And what has helped you to find the strength to rise above that adversity? I'm so sorry. because you're
I'm
crying.
so sorry. I was like, okay, Charlie, you coming on the show and you're gonna put your big girl pants on, do this thing, right? But that definitely speaks to the weight of, grief, right? And you asked, how was I able to cope? I think I'm still in the coping process. Um, some days it's definitely, the peace that passes all understanding, peace that makes no sense, right? But some days are definitely hard, and will continue to be hard. But definitely my faith, right? And these three women were not just like, sometimes it's like your mom is like a mom, your grandparents are like your grandparents. These were like close, deeply rooted relationships, right? My grandmoms and my mom, they were all women who rooted for me. I didn't have to perform to earn their love. It's almost like just existing was enough for them, right? I mean, whenever my mom called, if you're from Anguilla and a ragamuffin Jimmy, she would be like, "Hey, Queen," right? And as an adult, you wouldn't even really think of how those words can, shape your view of yourself or, you know, boost your confidence. But not having it, is a realization of the loss, right? But loss is all a part of life. All of us are going to have to deal with it. And it's something that is not openly spoken about. And I think that's what makes it a little bit even harder to process. But that is a journey I'm walking. And by the grace of God, I will continue to heal.
I'm so sorry. So guys, let's just take a quick break there. Because I didn't want to make Charla cry. So let's take a little bit break and we'll be right back. So, guys, if you're still rocking with us, thank you so much for joining us on the Women of the West Indies show. I'm your host, Vernaire Bass, and this afternoon I am sitting down with the beautiful Anguillian, Mrs. Charla Hobson. Unfortunately, I made Charla cry because we just touched on a very emotional issue, the loss of her mother and her grandmothers, which all came at a very tumultuous period in all of our lives during COVID. So she was just sharing a little bit there about how to deal with grief and how grief is something that you never truly get over. But one of the things I remember when I spoke to you though is, you know, how much you were in love with these women, and you even described yourself as an old person's person. Right? So I feel like at least you were able to share those fantastic memories with them, right? And do you think that in any way that, by being in the Cayman Islands, that may have softened the blow a little bit so you're not just surrounded by the memories of your mom and your grandparents all the time?
I would say definitely yes, and also probably no, because although was I am in the Cayman Islands, I communicated them with them with a particular frequency, right? So for my dad's mom, she was 99, so she had lived a wonderful life, and
Wow.
we would communicate whenever we can, as she was able to. My mom's mom, she was 96 when she passed, and we would communicate, you know, she would always say, "Thank God for technology," when she see me on the phone screen and she can talk to me there. But my mom's death was tragic. It was a car accident, and I was actually home at the time about to visit, and so although that made it even more like a crazy thing, I think that being there actually helped. But definitely, back to your question too of being away, it was like maybe being away from them kind of like prepared me a little bit. I don't know if
Mhm.
enough, but a little bit.
Yeah. Like I said, I just think grief is never something that you'd be able to get over. But I think the not the good thing about this story. because obviously your mum passed away quite tragically. But it's nice to hear that both of your grandmothers lived to such old ages. That's something that I don't even think that many of us in this generation may even get to that age. So they live very full lives. And you told me that they were trailblazers as well. So what do you think that if you were to think of one thing from each of those women that you still carry through with you today, what would it be?
I would say for sure one thing is probably their silliness or their quirkiness. Like all three of them, they never took life too serious. They were like always some silly bone in them, and also their resilience. They were all women who did so much without complaining, and also the way they saw people beyond their family, the way they showed up for other people and just created space for other people. That's something that really stood out about all or stands out about all three of them, that I think is something that I that are qualities that I have aspired to have.
And then obviously the good thing is that you still found the strength to carry on and to still pursue your dreams. So
Mhm,
after being a fashion designer and educator for most of your adult life, you
mhm,
decided to switch lanes and become a personal stylist.
mhm.
So what motivated you to start Style by Charla?
Okay, so all along I would have been doing some sort of personal styling. So I had done work like with pageant queens, everyday women or my family, everyone texting to say, hey, I have this event. What do you think I should wear? Should I wear this shoe with this? Should I do this? Should I do that? So it's kind of been a role I've always played. Um, but the whole fashion design thing, it's something I still do on the side, like as a little passion project sometimes. But in terms of feeling like it's still aligned with me, it's something that I'm still an enthusiast, right? But for me personally, as I evolved as a woman, I felt like personal styling was something that more aligned with who I am today, right? And being able to approach fashion, approach style in a way that is more meaningful to me personally than, let's say, someone showing up on a runway or someone showing up on a one day of their life and feeling great on that one day of their life. To me, personal styling and style coaching, which is what I do predominantly, is an avenue to show women that it's your everyday style that matters, because how you show up on a daily basis is what impacts your life, right? Your experience, how you experience life, how present you are, how confident you feel. And so all of those things would have led me to decide to, focus and hone in more on the personal styling aspect.
Let's explore that a little bit, because some of us who are used to styling ourselves may not know the difference between personal styling and personal coaching. So, what would you say are the difference between the two?
Okay, so personal styling is more about, let's say, if you had an event and you want to be styled for that event, you would enlist my help in that, getting that as personal styling. Style coaching more has to do with a comprehensive, broad, holistic approach in which we're looking at your style fully, a full picture of your style, right? What are your preferences? A lot of women don't even know what exactly their preferences are, right? What are the colors that work well for you? What is your lifestyle? Is your wardrobe well equipped for your lifestyle? Or is it equipped for some fantasy style that you have for two two formal events a year, but everything in your wardrobe is formal, and for your everyday work or to run errands is not well supplied for that, right? And also dressing for your body type so that you can dress confidently and flatter your body well and stuff like that. So style coaching is a more holistic approach, which allows you to then use style as a tool, right? And not be just like loads of clothes in a wardrobe, you don't know what to wear, and kind of like just wasting your resources, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, because I think one of the interesting things about approaching style is that most of us dress based on trends and
Mhm.
not necessarily for our body type. Because recently, I know on your Instagram page, which is fantastic, guys, you should definitely check it out, Style by Charla. You posted this video where you're actually very vulnerable because you put yourself on camera and you were speaking about your body shape. And then it got me thinking, like, I've never really given much thought to my own body shape and how I can wear different things to complement my style. So let's talk a little bit about body shape. What are the main body types or body shapes out there? And just give us a little pointer on how you should maybe even dress your body shape or accentuate your natural born features.
Yes, right. So definitely, it's something that can be up for debate because there are a lot of people who would say like, oh, you should love your body however it is, and that is fine and that's true. I also advocate for loving your body, which is why being able to having a knowledge about how to dress it in a way that you will feel better is what I do, right? So this is not something I came up with, but proportions are just something that exists, right? I didn't invent it. It's just when we look in nature, when we look all around us, proportions and measurements are something that just exists. And some proportions are like the standard proportions, which visually our eyes see them as better, right? So when it comes to body shapes, a lot of times the hourglass is considered to be, I guess, like the ideal body shape, right? And some people may want to argue, but if we admit it as women, we're kind of thinking like we wish we had an hourglass body shape, right? So there are ways to dress your body to give the illusion of, having those proportions, like out like this, in like this, right? So the body shapes would be like inverted triangle, which I am, where my shoulders are broad, my waist may come in a bit, but I don't have like hips, right? So that would be an inverted triangle. Then you have the triangle where you have smaller shoulders, and then it comes out underneath, so you have like a smaller waist and hips. You have a rectangle where everything is kind of like straight, so shoulders, waist, and hips are just like a rectangle. You have the oval, so that would be, kind of narrow up here, a lot of fullness in the middle, right? And so at the end of the day, you want to think about how you can create volume in the areas where you don't have a lot of volume, and how you can also create definition in areas that are not as defined, like your waistline, how you can detract, right, from areas that are bigger than you would like them to be, right? And so it's just playing around with patterns, colors, and silhouettes to really create that sense of balance. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know in the video, for example, you were saying something like you had, wider shoulders. So then you were showing us how to wear tops that were, had a little bit more frill at the end and stuff like that to accentuate that. And even how, adding a jacket to adding a belt, or even adding shoes to distract someone's eyes away from maybe the shape that you don't have. So it's only, since following your page, guys, which you should definitely do at Style by Charla, that I really, started to think, wow, maybe I've just been dressing for trends or what's trendy, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every style that comes out suits me. And then you were even doing things like comparing, say, skinny jeans to bell-fit jeans, and I was like, I literally saw the transformation on your body when
Mhm.
you change the style. So it's absolutely fantastic, because sometimes when you think of a personal stylist, you just think, why would I need a personal stylist, but how do you believe personal style can transform and empower women in their everyday lives?
I definitely think that, as I mentioned before, it's a tool that can help them to live life more purposefully, more authentically. Because, as you said just now, if you're just going based on the trends that are available in stores, which, by the way, a little caveat. I'm not against trends. Trends are great when you know what your trends are, right? So, for example, if off the shoulder tops are your thing and they're trending, that's a great time to jump on that trend because they may not be trending for the next 5 years, right? So, with trends, it's just knowing what your trends are, right? But going back to what it can do for women. So, you're doing it more authentic. It helps you to be more authentic because it's like you're more aware of who you are, what season you're in life, how you want to show up, what you want your personal brand to be. And so then you're building your wardrobe and you're getting dressed from that point of view, right? It also allows you to be more present because what we find is a lot of women who dress really well, look great, they're so focused on what they have on, how it's fitting, I'm the bomb, I'm this, I'm that, that they're not present, right? and something is not fitting well. I don't like how I look, but I'm here, so I'm mad. I'm in a bad mood. What is the experience my husband is having? What's the experience my children is having? So I just think that it helps you to be, we have different sources of joy, right? But personal style can be one of those sources, one of those things that enables a woman to show up with more confidence, to show up on purpose, and to show up just in a way that you're present. Because life passes you by quickly.
So, what do you think of the concept of dressing for your age? Because I think that as women, we can take that to two different extremes. We can take it to where you're dressing way too young for your age, and also where you're dressing too old for your age. Because I think when you get to a certain age, sometimes you think that, that's something that young girls do. But there's some fashion items that you can actually wear that will still make you look beautiful. So, what do you think of the idea of dressing for your age, and where do you draw the line as a personal stylist?
Oh, you put me on the spot, Vernaire. I would say dressing for age. I don't think you should be dressing based on your age per se, unless I'm thinking more women now than younger girls. Okay, so let's say women, right? Like from the age of 18 and up, right? To me, the focus should always be on who you are, knowing who you are, and more dressing based on fit, right? Fit, appropriateness for your lifestyle, right? I think the concept of age is just a number, and we we have the power to, whether it's through a healthy lifestyle or whether it's through the resources we have, we our age should not determine what we put on, right? Of course, you want to be appropriate based on, the context or whatever. But I would say that that should not be like the main focus when you're thinking about fashion, should not be your age, because that could be very limiting. And if you're limiting yourself based on a number, that could mean that you're not showing up authentically either.
A very diplomatic answer there. So what would you say in your opinion, what are
Mhm.
some of the key things that a woman should definitely have in their wardrobe?
That's also a trick question, okay? Because I know on the gram you will see like a lot of people saying like these are the 10 items you need to have in your wardrobe. And sometimes I do share some things like that as well. But that is where having a style coach or personal stylist is critical, because our lifestyles are different, our bodies are different, right? So there are some like essential things we should have, but how they look will look different than, based on the person, right? So, of course, off the bat, I would say, always having a good blazer is something to have, right? Depending on your lifestyle, it may not be the traditional black blazer, right? It may not be the traditional polyester, whatever blazer. It might be a linen blazer. It may be a jean blazer, right? So a good neutral blazer is something that you should have. I think everyone should have also a jean jacket. The style of the jacket may vary, but having a jean jacket, that's something that you can layer with dresses. You can create lots of outfits. Having some good neutral bottoms are great as well. A lot of times people focus on buying a lot of tops, but bottoms are really the foundation of outfits. If you have good bottoms, you can create a lot of outfits. What else? Definitely good underwear, because having the foundation and structure is also something that's ideal. But what are the essentials, as I mentioned before, really comes down to an individual by individual basis. A white button down shirt is also something that can work across the board, right? As well. But it comes down to an individual by individual basis.
So some fantastic ideas there in terms of fashion. Like I said, guys, you can go and check out Style by Charla on Instagram for more style inspiration. But as a multifaceted professional, how do you balance your roles in style coaching, personal styling, and also learning and development?
Okay. So in terms of balancing, the balance, of course, is not equal, because my full-time job is being a facilitator. So I work in learning and development. And so style coaching is something that I do, I guess you can say it's my side hustle, but it's something, as we would have spoken about before, that I'm highly qualified for and well experienced in, right? But it's definitely something that I sort of do on the side. And of course, being present for myself and for my family is also something that's important, right? So in terms of balance, I don't know if there is. Sorry, one second, just making sure my computer is charged up. I don't know if I would say I try to create balance, but it's not like an equal balance. In different seasons, one might be up here, one might be down here, one might be, but I just try to ensure that I do an amazing job in my full-time job. I do an amazing job for my clients in terms of transforming their wardrobes, and that I do an amazing job for me in terms of making sure that, I pour into myself, I get the help that I need, and I try to do an amazing job as a wife and a mom as well.
Fantastic. So, what are your future plans for your brand, even though it's your side hustle? And how do you envision continuing to inspire and empower women through your work?
Okay, so I would say that's something that I'm still talking to God about. I'm still seeking His will on this. I know that I want to be able to continue to inspire women to use style strategically and to steward the resources that God has given them in a wise way, even through their style, and to just really connect with themselves, right? And use personal style as something to do that. How that's gonna look a couple years from now, I'm not exactly sure, but as I said, it's something me and God are working on. We're talking about it. Who knows? Maybe I might scale to only doing that. I don't know, but we'll see what His will is. His will be done.
So, in terms of learning and development that you're currently doing, is that still fashion related or is that a different subject?
No, so this is in, I guess you would say, like corporate. So it's different, whether it's communication skills. So it's like adult learning within the workplace, right? And something I would say is, when we spoke before, we kind of spoke about, like your purpose and what you're born to do, right? And for me, honestly, as I have grown and in the different seasons, I feel like a lot of times we are placed in different positions where we build skills that complement each other, and God places us in different things that we did not even plan or imagine, right? And so I think it's important to always have a why that is greater than yourself. Like, so for me personally, I think that my why in life is really to like empower people, to help them to realize their full potential and to just really live a purposeful life. So whether that has been children in a classroom or adults in the workplace or women with their style, right? It's all interconnected. And so I'm able to use all these skills that I've learned in these different areas to break down information in a way that's understandable, where it's meaningful, where, people can understand and implement things. So they all like complement each other.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing about life in general. It's all about building up all these different experiences and lessons that you learn along the way. Because the woman who you were when you started out in sixth form is completely different to the woman who you are now. So obviously, based on just by virtue of being in the Cayman Islands, that probably shifted a lot of things for you.
Mhm.
And this question is something that I always ask guests who appear on the W.O.W Show, and I know that that is that there's never just going to be that one moment in your life. But can you share with me a wow moment in your life, that moment when you truly figured out that you were doing what you were born to do, and based on the fact that you do quite a few different things, I'm not sure which one you're going to choose, but can you remember a moment in your life where God just made you go, wow?
So, as you said, there are probably several of those, right? One that comes to the top of my head is probably my first fashion show, where just my whole family were there, and everyone was in green, like my dad, my mom, my grandmas, my brother, and just having that support and having them present at this first fashion show that was so well supported by the community, that would definitely be a wow moment. And obviously it went well, so it was fashion, so I probably thought like, oh, this is what I was born to do, right? But as I mentioned just now, I don't know if it's a bond to do thing in terms of like a career. I've realized that sometimes you can be so fixated on like, this is my career, this is what I'm born to do. And if for any reason things shift, you just like lose it because this vision, this thing you had in a box that, you were going to be, it just derails you, right? And so for me, in terms of just the different interactions I have with the women that I work with and them having the transformations in their lives and their wardrobes, with my students in learning development, when I help them to transform the way they approach how they do their jobs or how they interact with people. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's just a lot of little tiny moments that remind me of the why, which is to build and empower people.
So I have another interesting question for you. If you could speak to Charlotte in sixth form who puts on that first show,
Mhm.
what would you say to her and why?
Oh my goodness. I would say to Charla, you're brave and do keep going, keep doing what you're doing, and keep dreaming, keep dreaming. And I guess that is what I did.
'Cause that's the thing, like, it's interesting saying, to go back to that young woman, but I think that you were a very courageous young
Uh-huh.
woman back then,
Yeah, I
so
think I probably need to talk to Charlotte the next more than one, back all of
What
that.
about if we switch it? What about if Charla back then was to say something to Charla now? Do you think that some of that maybe you have lost some of that courage, or there's something within that Charla back then that was maybe more adventurous than you are now?
Definitely, I was more fearless. So I guess I can say to Charlotte now that, the same God that was with you then is the God that's with you now. And what may seem impossible is still possible.
Absolutely. So another question that I ask these guests is if you can recommend a guest to be on the Wow Show, and I know that you send me some amazing guests already, but feel free to tell me some more. If you could recommend someone to be a guest on the show, who would it be and why?
Hands down, the person I think would be an amazing guest on this show would be Janine Edwards. Janine was actually the person that connected us, and she has been, such a source of support for me, even as a teenager. And even when I was in college, I would go back home and work in her company. And she was also like always a dreamer, encourager. And, I think she would be a great person on the show. So I can't wait for whenever she will be on the show.
So, Janine, I hope that you are listening right now because I have been trying to get Miss Edwards on the show, and Miss Edwards has been recommending everyone else under the sun except herself. So, no pressure to Miss Janine Edwards, who, wherever you are out there, Darla has put you on the spot. So, I shall be reaching out to you to say, when are you coming on the show, girl? When are you coming on the show? But guys, thank you so much, everybody who has tuned in. And Charla, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story this afternoon. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable and open. I'm sorry that I made you cry, but I know that it's a very deep moment and something that means a lot to you, losing those fantastic and phenomenal women who are also wonderful women of the West Indies.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being on the show. And
Thank-
guys, sorry to cut you.
No, I was just saying thank you, and I admire what you're doing so much, and I really look forward to it growing from strength to strength.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that because I really want to be the person to shine a spotlight on women of the West Indies. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And as usual, make sure that you set your alarms and tune in next week for what promises to be another inspiring episode. Next week, I'll be leaving Anguilla and heading over to the neighboring island of St. Kitts for an uplifting conversation with educator and philanthropist Miss Sandra Yorks Gums. Trust me, she is someone who has done a lot in the space of philanthropy and also education. So she's someone that you definitely want to tune in to hear more about her story that's filled with all of life's ups and downs, but also filled with someone who has never given up no matter what life threw at her. So set your alarms and join us next Sunday and every Sunday after that on 664 Connect Media and Radio Anguilla at 4:30 p.m. And you can also tune into the rebroadcast on ZJB Radio every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. as well. I'm also very happy to say that the Women of the West Indies show is also now a podcast. So if you go to our socials, you can click on the link in bio and get access to all of the interviews, and you can just listen to them in your own time. And also, if you go on Spotify or Apple Podcast, they're also available there for you as well. So thank you so much for your eyes and your ears this Sunday, and I shall see you again, same time, same place next week. Thanks again, Charla, and bye, everybody.